A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Abhishek, and I'm here to talk to you guys about something that the entire world fears. Studies show that 41% of the general public are afraid not of a heart attack, they're not afraid of a terrorist attack, but what really fears them, what really scares them is when they're asked to come in front and face an audience. I'm here to talk to you guys about what makes someone an effective communicator. Alright? The art of public speaking is not an art that's been mastered by all, but it's also an art that can be mastered by all, provided we understand a few basics, a few elements, a few constituents that make a public speech a great one. I've very interestingly named my discussion as Bewitched Moment. Now when I say that, I'm not here to tell you to become a witch, but bewitch refers to your strategy. It's an impact that you create so that you can captivate your audience. And here, while we review these slides, I want you to realize that some of the constituents in these slides will help you become a speaker who can create n number of bewitched moments every time you're interfacing your audience. So moving on, I would like to go back a little to the history, 1930. I'm sorry, it was 1908. I don't know how many of us have heard of a gentleman called Teddy Roosevelt. He stood on the Grand Canyon, and these are the few words that he uttered. "Do nothing to mar its grandeur, for the ages have been at work upon it, and man cannot improve it. Keep it for your children, your children's children, and all who come after you." These words, ladies and gentlemen, changed the face of the earth. Grand Canyon was a target spot for multi-millionaires who wanted to convert that place into spas, into hotels, into commercial complexes. But it was these words of Teddy Roosevelt that made Grand Canyon what it is today. One of the famous waterfalls, a fabulous tourist spot across the world that we all yearn to go to. Teddy Roosevelt has given us an insight as to how powerful words can be. Words become your first constituent of a great public speech. A few years later, in the year 1938, his fifth cousin, and I'm sure we all
assert my firm belief.
I'm sorry about that. Franklin Roosevelt was the fifth cousin who went on to become the president of his country. Now, the reason I want to show this video to you is because I want you to realize that certain words that some of the great leaders have spoken has inspired the world to such an extent that we can't even imagine. I want you guys to focus and pay attention to the words that Franklin Roosevelt uses in his video.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat.
How awesome was that? That brings me to the first three constituents of a great public speech. I've already covered words. Now you might realize, why have I put a 7% in there? Studies have shown that while words are your first medium to communicate to your audience, words only constitute 7% of what makes a great speaker. The other two parameters that makes a great speaker are voice tone, which constitutes 38%, and body language. Everything that you do, there are two ways of communication. One is what I'm telling you, which is a verbal communication, and the other is body language, which is non-verbal. And a large part of communication that we do is majorly non-verbal. Constituent 4, laser compelling messages. Now you might have come across a lot of speakers who not just use a lot of data, a lot of analytics in their speech, but what that does is that tends to digress them from the entire motive of their conversation. The idea to become a great speaker is to use a power headline, a power tagline, that defines the entire course of your conversation. And that is what I mean when I say lasered, compelling messages. We move on to constituent fifth, which is communication, effectiveness, continuum. Now, understand that a great speaker is not just somebody who speaks well. I mean, there is this whole myth where people believe that if I have to speak publicly, I have to go and deliver a speech. Henceforth, what I want you all to do, ladies and gentlemen, is delete the word speech from your vocabulary, because giving a great public speech or a public speaking event is not about giving a speech. It's about having a conversation about a topic that you're authentically passionate about. I cannot speak about something unless I am passionate about speaking about that particular subject. That is what I mean when I speak of my fifth constituent, which is nothing but a communication effectiveness continuum. Use words, use taglines, use statements that will create that impact for you. And when you create that impact, that is where you've created your bewitched moment. Constituent 6 now. Studies have shown that we human beings have 5 sensory organs. We all know that, don't we? Seeing, smelling, tasting, feeling, touching. All of these sensory organs translate into 4 categories, which we term as 4 language of human communication. We all know what visual is. How I look at you, whether I'm looking at you in the eye, whether I'm looking above your head. All of this translates into a message that I'm giving to the receiver. That's visual communication. Auditory, how you interpret the entire external environment into words. That's your auditory capabilities. Auditory digital is nothing but using data, using analytics in my communication as a specific constituent in my speech. Kinesthetic, well, it needs no definition. It is that moment in your speech when you know for a fact that you have created a wow factor. And that can happen only if you have all 4 of this. If you have just one of these constituents, you're an average speaker. If you have 2, you're doing all right. But if you have all 4, that makes you a fantastic speaker. Constituent 7, this is my last secret to becoming a great speaker. Now, I have shown you one audio of Franklin Roosevelt and what impact his words have done onto the world. And so did the words of Teddy Roosevelt, which is why Grand Canyon is still existent. So we're going to listen to a few speeches by some of the greatest leaders and see how they have inspired the world. What it also does is, these speakers also give us an indication as to how dramatizing, how associating power words with your speeches make a great difference to the way you look at public speaking overall. So,
Into the house, and I said to those who joined the company, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat.
These were some of the famous words by Prime Minister Winston Churchill in the House of Commons in 1940. And that entire speech was very defining when it came to the history of England back in the year 1940. This is Mr. John Kennedy.
Not what your country can do for you, and what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
This was Sir John F. Kennedy. We all don't need an introduction to this high-profile politician across the world. There is another speech by Sir John F. Kennedy which I want all of you to listen to. This was at the Rice University, wherein he was very much driven by the passion of innovation, and that is very indicative in his speech. Take a look. Sorry about the technical glitch there. Okay, we're going to listen to Martin Luther King first.
My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the...
You will be surprised. This was a speech that was given by Martin Luther King just a day before he died. And he knew history says it all. He knew that he was going to die the very next day. And he wanted to summarize what glorious days he has seen as a leader. This speech was recorded just one day before he passed away. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what I want you all to retrospect is that great leaders become great leaders because of their ability to speak well. And a lot of us might think that these are speeches which eventually ends up becoming a boring speech, but that's not how it is. A lot of prominent leaders that you would come across do not just make a speech. What they do is that they create a bewitched moment that not just captivates the entire audience, but involves the audience to a point where we start believing in them. And that is the short message that I want to put across to you guys. And I want you all to treat your public speaking with passion so that you can go out and bewitch. Thank you very much for joining me today.